Hello friends, welcome back. And now we are on the topic of health and we shall discuss what we call as models of health and illness. In case this sounds unfamiliar to you, the next few slides will explain what exactly we mean by a model of health and illness. First of all, what are scientific models? A scientific model is something that represents a system of ideas. We can express it mathematically or otherwise, as we shall see, but in essence it's a system of ideas. And we formalize it so that we can identify and understand patterns in our observations. Always remember, science begins with observation, not with theorizing. Homeopathy made a big difference to the field of medicine because Hahnemann, the founder, found that people had divorced themselves from observation and had got interested in theorizing. We shall see more about that when we understand the philosophy of homeopathic medicine later in this particular course. Our scientific model, when we adopt one, should be able to explain and predict the phenomenon around us. It could be regarding health if it's a scientific model concerning health. Models, once again, can be of different types. They can be abstract. For example, the concept of the atomic structure is in essence quite abstract. We can't see the subatomic particles, but we can always imagine them and represent them in a certain model. For instance, when we come to the atomic model of Niels Bohr, it was more or less a replication of the planetary model, or the way the planets are distributed around the sun. A scientific model could be expressed in the form of a paper, or there could be a consensus in which people agree to certain broad points. In this particular lesson, we shall be looking at 5 models which will help us to understand the practice of homeopathy. They gradually build upon each other, and you might find parallels with that in your specialization of medical practice. But remember, many of these models may be entirely absent in your present field of practice. Just have a look at that, and in the end we'll be doing a short case and you can see how it is different when it comes to the practice of homeopathy. I'll give the names. We have a pathogenic model. As the name suggests, it deals with pathogens disturbing health. We have a biological model of health in which we explain health and illness through biological processes. Then we have a holistic model in which we take the environment around a person as well. We have a holographic model in which we look at some universals. And finally, we have a relational model which is much more advanced, and I don't know if we'll be able to cover that in this course, but it's good to know that there is something known as relational because we'll be dealing with it briefly in the case that comes up at the end of this lesson. Coming to the pathogenic model, as the name suggests, it is something to do with pathogens being a causative agent. So at the heart of the pathogenic model is causation. And that cause is an external cause, which causes a disturbance. That is followed by a chain of causation. If we have an external virus or bacteria that enters the body, that becomes an external cause. There goes and a virus can lodge itself inside the cell, and that causes a chain of causation, which results in a disease which is accompanied with certain symptoms and can be positively identified and given a name of a particular disease. We also assume that these causes lead to the illness. Illness, as we know from an earlier lesson, is what the person feels and what takes the person to a practitioner of healing art. And then the whole strategy is to treat the cause so that we treat the illness. But that doesn't always work. For example, if somebody has borne the insults, say, of asbestos, and he has got fibrosis of the lungs, taking that person away from that external cause is not going to undo the damage that has been done. So these are some of the shortcomings of the pathogenic model. So we have to look beyond that. Then comes the biologic model. One thing that is understood in this particular model is that while chemical reactions are very predictable, and all of us know we can reduce them to equations consisting of formulas of the constituents participating in the chemical reaction, we find in real life that even though biology is made up of chemical compounds, biological responses in a living being are much different. In a living system, every cause results in a different reaction. We all know that people exposed to the same virus or to the same bacteria may have the name or label of one common disease, but they'll have a variety of symptoms. And that is so because every living system results in a different reaction to the same cause. We acknowledge that in a biologic model. So we look forward to a unique expression for a common cause in a biologic model. Another thing that we understand in a biologic model is the symptoms always express an illness. Any departure from a normal state of health which a person feels comfortable with changes when there is a symptom, and that is what makes a person feel ill and what takes him to a doctor or a healer. And symptoms are actually a guide to a homeostatic upset, because the body, as we saw in an earlier lesson, has the capability, every living creature has the capability of coming back to its homeostatic or its state of healthy equilibrium. The fact that there is a homeostatic upset is revealed only through symptoms. And of course, signs which can be confirmed through laboratory analysis of fluids and body parameters, etc. The next higher inclusive model of holistic is, it includes whatever was said earlier with the physiologic model and the biologic model. But in addition to that, as the name suggests, it looks at factors which go beyond just the immediate, what we witness immediately in front of our eyes. And a single cause is not sufficient to explain every reaction. This explores the fact that why is it that in a community, even in an epidemic, only certain people are infected, and out of those infected people, only some of them are developing symptoms or developing disease. Another thing that we see is that illness is unlikely to be expressed through only one symptom set. For the same named disease, for the same cause, each person will express it differently, not just in location of the symptoms like lungs or the spleen or the liver, but also in how they are expressed, not only in the words of the patient, but also how they are seen externally. Another thing that a holistic model assumes and understands is that cause and effect are not linear, but they are codependent. One can cause the other. A person may have more susceptibility to an infection because of poor immunity, which may be caused because of poverty, and that poverty could be because the person is incapable of holding on to a job because of an emotional upset caused by a divorce, and that divorce happened to be caused by so many other social, religious or other reasons. So cause and effect are codependent. One can cause the other and one can aggravate the other. So it is not just a simple linear relationship. The next important thing is that remedy selection must suit the constitution of the person and the illness that the person is suffering from. When we talk about the constitution, there'll be many more features that we'll have to include from many traditional viewpoints of health and disease, and we shall come to that later. Next in the hierarchy of complexity and depth is the holographic model. By holography, we understand that the part reveals the whole. If you take a holographic picture and you cut it into pieces, each single piece will actually have the same impression as the whole picture. That is exactly what we mean by a hologram. A hologram represents the entirety even in its pieces. For example, if I had a holographic heart and I cut the heart into a number of pieces, each piece will be identical to the entire heart. Just like every molecule of gold is similar no matter whether it is taken from an earring or a nose ring that you are wearing. So the holographic model goes even further, not only in complexity but also in its viewpoint and range. Even the smallest part represents the whole. Any complete symptom describes the whole state of the person. We will come to the concept of complete symptom later. But a complete symptom means it describes the way a person feels through different perspectives, not just the locality, but also the modality, time of the day, posture of the person, what irritates or what makes it feel better. We'll be looking at this in depth later, but good to understand that we have the concept of a complete system in homeopathy, and that is something we'll be striving to achieve during our case taking. And to understand what is the complete set of symptoms that a person is having, we often describe that as the totality. Holographic model also requires to use advanced concepts. I'm just naming a few of them: miasms, humors, which some of you might be aware from traditional medicine, the 5 elements theory, and so many other things. Everything goes into that and helps us to establish finding the correct remedy and also the correct therapy. Another thing that we must understand in holographic model is that both health and illness, they express deeper compensatory aspects. Every illness has a meaning. It is not just a representation of symptoms, and nor is it just the effect of a common cause. At the deeper level, each person has a compensation which he or she is achieving through the process of illness. These are quite deep concepts, but I'm sure by the end of the course, you will be able to not only get a good understanding, you'll also be able to handle them and use them in your day-to-day practice. Then we come to the last model, which is relational and which is even more complex than all the other models that we saw so far. It takes into account the relationship between a practitioner and a patient. In the references section, you'll find a paper by one Professor Milgrom, and Professor Milgrom in fact uses quantum physics to explain how the interaction between a practitioner, a patient, and the remedy goes into the healing process. It involves a lot of mathematics. Even I can't understand all of it, but suffices to say that there is more to the interaction between a practitioner and a patient than just collecting data or facts. We'll also be looking at that in depth when we come to some chapters that deal with the interaction, such as narrative medicine. Then relational model also takes into account sensations, because every symptom has got a different sensation and meaning for that person at a deeper level. This process is also largely intuitive. In science, we are told to look beyond intuition, but that's not correct when it comes to healing. Also, we take into account the psychodynamic and the reflective effects of the interaction between the practitioner and the patient. Because each time there is an interaction, something rubs off from one to the other. It's a very sacred and a very personal, it's a very intuitive kind of a relationship that a patient and a practitioner establishes when you reach this level of healing. So these were the 5 models that we looked at. Nothing serves better than looking at an example. Otherwise, this was just a set of words which I had been speaking. Let's take a simple case for which you will be able to associate something out of each one of these models.